Many of you may have attended roundtable talks here before, and we'll be sharing a poll to see who's in the room in a little bit. But in case you're new here and not familiar with our roundtable talks, FRN does these on a biannual basis, typically in February and August, just to share our program outcomes and what we're looking to do. So with this year, or this roundtable talk, we just wrapped up our 21-22 academic year, our fiscal year, and so gathering a lot of fun, awesome successes and challenges and just data that we've seen over the last year and sharing more with that with you all. And then also looking ahead to this school year. I've seen a lot of schools starting, a lot of FRN chapters getting back up and running. So just sharing a little bit about what is to come. So to give you a glimpse on who on the call, my name is Cassie and I'm the Director of Development here at Food Recovery Network. I'll be our moderator for today, so I'll help guide the conversation. We also have Kimmy on the call, who's our newly hired Stakeholder Associate, and she will be supporting in the chat and the Q&A function and some tech things. We have Regina Anderson, our Executive Director of Food Recovery Network, and Katie Jones, our Chief Operating Officer, who will share some words during our time here today.
And Kimmy, who was on SOB, who was a student leader and is now part of the FRN National Staff. Yes. One of our two newest hires where we hired FRN chapter leaders.
Yes, shout out to Julia, who I saw was in the chat, is our other FRN student chapter. So I'll give everyone a chance to share a couple of words. Regina, do you want to kick us off as we get started here today?
Thanks so much, Cassie. And, I wanted to maybe set the scene a little bit with my words, just to say the theme you'll hear. Usually it's invitation, and that is definitely the case again, but also abundance. So think about that. There's going to be a lot of thank yous and flowing of goodwill for this incredible information that we want to share, and we hope that the information that you will share with us and your questions. Starting off with a huge thank you to Cassie, Kimmy, and Katie. Kimmy just started on the team and helped to put this together for us, really digging in. I think this is week 2. So thank you, Kimmy. I also wanted to, thank the board of directors who are on the call with us. So to Tina, our amazing board president, Jennifer is our secretary, Kenneth and Matt, thank you for being with us. And then Gary over at Ample Harvest, who is on our advisory board, thank you so much for being with us. And to everyone here, we know that you could, be in a lot of different places. Everyone is so busy. Thank you for taking the next hour with us to share, to learn, and be in community. It means a lot to us.
Thank you, Regina, for those kind words. Katie, do you want to share a couple of thoughts as we kick off here today?
I just want to say and echo what Regina said. Thank you so much for being here today, especially all of the SOB members on the call. It's lovely to see you. Again, so much of what we have done has been because of SOB's guidance and our student chapter leaders. And so for all of you on the call today, we're delighted to talk with you.
Amazing. Thanks, Katie. And for folks that don't know, SOB is our Student Alumni Advisory Board, if you're not familiar with that acronym. And Kimmy, you want to share a couple words, maybe a little bit about your FRN chapter that you were a part of?
Yeah, of course. Thank you first to everybody for coming. I'm excited to be here. Like Katie and Regina mentioned, I am a former FRN chapter leader. I was a co-founder and president of my first chapter at Westchester University of Pennsylvania. It's right around Philly, so I see a lot of people from Philly here, so hello. And I'm just really excited to be here and be able to have a different kind of input and really show what our chapters did on the ground and be able to kind of convert that over to national too.
Awesome, thanks, Kimmy. And Kimmy was also previously a part of our Student and Alumni Advisory Board as well. Great. So now we know the folks on our end. So we wanted to launch a poll to see who's in the room, virtual room with us here today. I know a lot of you introduced yourself. I'll ask Kimmy to prompt our first poll just to get a sense of who's on the call. Are you a student or alumni? Are you a higher education professional? A hunger fighting nonprofit partner, food service provider, maybe you're a food recovery verified food business. or just kind of a general community supporter on the call here today. So please answer the poll on the screen. I see a lot of answers coming in. We'll just leave it up just for a few more seconds. All right, Kimmy, you can go ahead and stop the poll. And then if you're able to share the results, great. Awesome. So it looks we have a good mix today. A lot of students and alumni, which is amazing. We saw that coming in through our registration, really excited about that, and the students on the call. A lot of higher education professionals, which is great. And then a good mix of the rest. This is looking really great. I think this is one of the most diversified audiences that we've had in a while. So again, thank you all for joining. Kimmy, if you want to stop sharing that one. One other quick poll before we dive in is we're curious if anyone else has joined a roundtable talks before. Like I said, we typically host these in February or August. And just the last couple of years, we started these in August 2020. And some you might not be sure. Looks like we have some answers coming in. I'll leave it open just for another couple seconds. All right, you can go ahead, Kimmy. Awesome, a lot of new folks. This is great. It's very good to know. Maybe you might have seen some blogs or some different recordings before, or if not, and you're completely new, really great to have you. This is awesome data for us to see, and we can definitely walk you through the different steps a little bit more. So thank you all for sharing a little bit about you. Now with that, I'll keep us rolling. Thanks, Kimmy. All right, before we dive into the meat, I wanted to just share a thank you to our different funders and sponsors here at Food Recovery Network. I know we have a couple on the call with us here today, so thank you for your support and just guidance and help with supporting our program here at FRN. So now to share, especially with so many of you on the call having not participated in roundtable talks before, we wanted to share, we share these every single time, what the goals of our time here today and what we are looking to accomplish. So we started these, like I mentioned, in August 2020, as we were rolling out our newest strategic framework, really as a commitment to, within our strategic framework, looking at a lot of data, very metric-driven, data-driven organization. So we want to be able to share with you all what we're learning in that process, sharing the actual data that we're collecting so our larger network knows what that might look like, and we can help provide to the food recovery field. A big reason why we like to do these is just to be transparent, to share what are our challenges, what are our successes, and having a feedback loop with our group, like KDJ was mentioning, and a lot of us were mentioning. Our Student Alumni Advisory Board is one example of being able to talk with our student leaders in this movement, but we also want to engage you all as our larger network of what are you seeing, and how can FRN help to provide to the field, and having these intentional conversations around how we can best support our network in this work. And then really deeply rooted within that, a lot of what Regina was saying in the beginning of just building these strong relationships with one another, being able to engage and support each other in this larger movement to end hunger and fight climate change. So we know that the virtual space can't always provide so much back and forth, but we encourage you to engage in the chat. Especially with so many of you new here at the Roundtable Talks, usually our chat is popping off. So please keep your questions and comments coming into the chat so we can have a conversation there. So with that, I will turn it over to Regina to get us started.
Thanks again. Thanks so much, Cassie. Wanted to just really quickly, because we know there's so many amazing students who are listening in. Thank you for all that you are doing for your chapters, for your communities. We absolutely want to remain in touch with you, be in more close communication with all of you. And we wanted to let you know that there's a few ways that, at least from the FRN crew out to you, that there are a few things to keep an eye out for. So we're going to have our welcome calls in September. Please join in if you can. We definitely want to schedule those individual calls with your amazing chapters. The OCA, the official chapter agreement, so important to help us understand, how we're recovering food. So just make sure that we keep it official. And with that, you're going to get your care package that we just started to put forward. And we love these care packages. We hope you do too. And then we're going to have a student town hall meeting. Really important that we hear from all of you, the engine of what is driving this movement to make food recovery the norm and not food waste. And so we can do that by being in community together. So be on the lookout and let us know if there's other ways you want to hear from us too.
Yes, and I will add that Kimmy will drop a couple of those links in the chat for the students on the call to engage in those ways.
Cool. And I wanted to give a quick update on the evolution of what it means to center those that are experiencing racial and ethnic disparities. What does it mean to center? And that's the work that FRN is supporting. And so we wanted to acknowledge that Food Recovery Network are our headquarters where some of us live. We are on the land of the Piscataway Conoy clan. They're also refer to themselves as a band or a tribe. And I personally pay rent to the Piscataway Conoy clan. I took a 4-part course on reparations, and hearing from different people within a variety of communities that are often pushed to the margins, including some of our Native peoples. And sometimes we hear that they love having the land acknowledgement. Who was here before our houses and our offices were here. But also, there is a material way that we can also acknowledge that we are on land that was once inhabited by other people. So thank you to the Piscataway Conoy clan for being stewards of our land, our water, our air. We continue to talk about Black Lives Matter, and we stand with our Asian community, and together we can collectively end Asian hate. And a bit about this, as Cassie mentioned, we started this in 2020, our roundtable talks to be in community together. And at that time, golly, can you remember? So many things were happening in the world. I feel like I've lived 1,400 lifetimes, but this was really the time when Mr. George Floyd was murdered, and racial uprisings were in the forefront in ways that maybe many of us hadn't experienced before. And during that time, 2 years ago, we talked to everyone about, should we be so forward about acknowledging that FRN stands with Black lives? And we heard from the community, from all of you, absolutely, yes, indeed. And where are we today with that, right? So why do we continue to say this, even though we are in a different place within, talking about racial justice? Well, when we think about who's the most vulnerable in our communities, who needs our help the most, and why do they need our help the most? So often, those are the communities that are Black and brown, and within those communities, those struggling even further happen to be people who identify as women. And so when we think about collectively as a society, as a group, how are we showing care, and to whom are we showing care? And we need to center our most vulnerable, because at any time that could be us. So I just wanted to set that acknowledgement and an intention for all of you to maybe think about just whatever intention you want as we spend the next hour together. And beautiful Rosa Parks, just to again think about our collective and what we can do as individuals as we think about the gratitude and abundance, as well as the invitations that are going to be throughout our time together. Centering. All right, this is what we're here to do, FRN. We are working to recover food to feed everyone who is hungry in the United States. And we do that in a variety of different ways, our unique contribution. So this, I know many of you, this is the first time on the Roundtable Talk, but maybe you are a bit familiar with the work of FRN, and if not, this is an invitation to you to continue the conversation later on, to see some of our content and our work and our other conversations, to learn about our results count framework that we call FRN 10X. And we have updated this language a bit more to be really a lot more pointed about what it is that FRN is trying to do. Recover surplus food to feed everyone who is hungry in the US. We have 2 different approaches to that. Feeding people today through the amazing work of our chapters, our student leaders, many of whom are on this call today. Again, thank you so much. The gratitude. We are recovering food to reduce the 26 million tons of excess food that is in the commercial and institutional settings, such as in higher education. And then we are also working to end hunger forever. We're not working to end hunger tomorrow. We're working to end hunger forever. And that is through ensuring the economic security of the 38 million people who are currently food insecure in the United States right now. And then you'll see the factors that we think through when we think about feeding people today and ending hunger forever. And then our strategies that you'll see throughout this conversation around creating powerful partnerships, increasing our impact, our ability to do the work, and amplifying our voice so that we can keep getting new people to come to our roundtable talks and to feel that invitation to be part of the work, because we need everyone to do a small part to end hunger forever.
Thank you, Regina, and for setting that frame. Now we'll move it on to Katie to what does this actually mean in practice? What are the goals that FRN is looking toward and what we're looking to achieve?
Let's dig in.
Great, thank you all. So again, what does our strategic framework FRN 10X actually mean in practice? Well, these are the goals we set in August of 2021. So at this roundtable last year, to say, okay, if we can recover 2 million pounds of food, if we can add chapters to our network, and if we can engage in powerful partnerships, we will then be seeing the fruits of our labor in terms of how FRN 10X is changing the way FRN works within the community. So this is what we set out to do at this time last year. And I am now delighted to report on how we did, which is that we surpassed all the goals, which I will get further into as I go deeper into our data and the slides to talk about that. But I first just have to say thank you to everyone on this call, because we wouldn't have been able to surpass our network goals if it hadn't been for the collective force that is on this call today, or will listen to this call in a couple of days. So we have recovered more than 5.5 million pounds of food just this year, which is a 300% increase over what we've done historically. And I'll show you some more data on that. We are delighted that we recruited 33 new chapters, 15 of which were in our target states, and then also continued to build and deepen powerful partnerships, which we'll also talk a little bit more later, as a way of really amplifying our work. So when you look across the FRN journey about what does this all roll up to, and as a 10-year-old organization, what have we done? So Cassie, you could advance the slide. 10 million pounds in 10 years, which is a really big deal. So again, a huge thank you to everyone who's on this call and everyone who has been part of the network. This is an incredible accomplishment. And what was so interesting is I think in our February roundtable, we were at just over 2 million pounds or something like that for what we recovered this year. And then the second half of this year has really catalyzed our impact. So to be able to say we did 10 million pounds in 10 years is an incredible accomplishment. So thank you so much for all to be part of that. This is a slide that talks a little bit about how you have seen our growth over the last couple of years. And in particular, what's so interesting is that we really started to grow during the pandemic. And Regina will talk about this a little bit later and what we learned. But the first thing I'll say to make some sense out of this graph is during the pandemic, our experience had been that people were willing to try new things, which is really what this movement is about embracing the uncertainty and trying to do something new to fight climate change and to feed people. And because people were willing to try something new, we were really able to catalyze that energy to do just that. So thank you so much. So let's look a little bit into the disaggregated data of how we actually got here to the 5.5 million pounds this year. overwhelmingly, what has really driven our impact, and this again goes back to FRN 10X and the powerful partnerships, has been our partnership with the FarmLink project. So shout out to anybody who has volunteered on these power hours. The FarmLink project is another student-run organization that seeks to recover surplus produce from large commercial farm fields across the United States. And during the pandemic, when a lot of our students weren't allowed to convene on campus, we partnered with the FarmLink project to do what we call power hours, which is helping identify large commercial farms across the United States to recover more food. So that has really continued to propel our impact. But what was interesting about that work, again, we'll talk about that a little bit more later, is while we were able to recover a tremendous amount of food through FarmLink, it wasn't necessarily going to the areas of the most need. It was going to the areas that had, enough refrigeration and easy loading docks and full-time staffing who could actually accept that quality of food. And so as we looked at that data, FRN said, you know what, like we're adding to the access disparity here. We need to supplement this work. Again, as Regina said at the beginning, how do we think in abundance of how we can supplement this to make sure not only are we recovering surplus food, but how is it going to the areas of the most need? So we'll talk a little bit later about our local community cleaning projects and what we've learned from that. So let me talk a little bit about our chapters and what we're seeing there. This again is the cut of the data a different way in terms of our chapter recoveries. One of the things that I think is really important to share is that 85% of our chapters are still experiencing COVID-related challenges. Among them are the fact that there was tremendous turnover during the pandemic for dining staff. So many campuses have brand new dining staff and they're still short staffed. So they're just trying to figure out how to get food on the floor, let alone recover it on the back end. It's almost too much for the system to bear. So that's been one particular challenge. Having students actually on campus to volunteer, a lot of campuses are still hybrid. So having that volunteer base to mobilize has been difficult. And there's also transportation concerns where there used to be shared university vehicles that students could use. And because of concerns around COVID, that resource wasn't necessarily available to them. So we have worked with our students to deploy strategies to try and address each one of those concerns. But it's clear it's going to be a while until we are back up to where we were and then surpass that, simply because the infrastructure pieces that we have relied on historically changed significantly during the pandemic. So with these challenges, part of what we said as a network was, okay, if we are having these challenges, how else can people activate to really continue to recover surplus food to feed everyone who's hungry in the United States? So one of the biggest changes we made to align with FRN 10X was actually diversify how our chapters could engage. Because while recovering food today is critical, in order to end hunger forever, we need advocacy, we need broad social movements, we need volunteerism to engage a broader base. So what's super interesting about this is now the majority of our chapters actually activate in different ways. So 3 years ago, when you could only do food recovery, now the majority also activate through particularly advocacy at the both campus and local level has been particularly popular with our students, specifically advocating for a food pantry on campus or the campus to have a policy around food waste. And some have also advocated at the community level. So what are towns doing? Shout out to anybody who might be in California on this call. At the state level, there's also been a lot, Cassie's in California. There was a lot of progress on statewide legislation. So our California chapters also got very involved in that. So that's been super exciting and something we will continue to support as we move forward. The last piece that I want to talk a little bit about has been our Atlanta Cleaning Initiative. And that's where I mentioned while we were covering a lot of food from the FarmLink project, it wasn't necessarily going to the areas of the most need. So we used our FRN 10X framework to see, literally using maps, where in the country does the EPA say there is the most amount of surplus food, excuse me, where in the country are the majority of people experiencing hunger. And then we overlaid that with where there are higher institution settings, specifically four-year universities. And then we overlaid that with where we have FRN chapters. So we said, okay, if there is supply and demand and a four-year institution that could become a chapter, or an area that has a chapter, let's actually focus there and see how we can move food to where it's most needed. And that's what we did with the Atlanta GLEANING Initiative. What was so wonderful about that work was not just that it moved 23,000 pounds of food in a matter of weeks, was that it was also the first time FRN could actually really look at our impact beyond food recovered, because we had such a micro site to really figure out what it meant to give back to community. So for instance, FRN having the convening power as a national network to bring different partners together in an intentional way helped establish new partnerships for them outside of their work for FRN. Similarly, with our commitment to pay everyone a living wage, we were able through that work to compensate our farmers, to compensate the various people who helped us along the way, to actually put money back into the community. This has been incredibly popular. We're continuing this work in Atlanta. Most specifically this fall, we're really going to look at like a hub stop model of what would it look like if we could actually make fresh produce available at elementary schools in particular areas of Atlanta. And we're replicating this work in Irvine. So again, like once we have this infrastructure established, where could we replicate based on FRN 10X? We're delighted with the initial results of this. The biggest thing I also want to say, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute when I hand it over to Regina, is what we loved about Atlanta was we got this larger picture of how we contribute to community. So one of the things that we're committing to next year is actually starting to track a broader set of indicators about how FRN contributes to community, because as all of the dedicated people are on this call know, it's so much more than pounds of food. So let's actually get some data so we can tell that story in a more holistic way. So that was a whole lot of information. I want to turn it over to Regina for anything I might have forgotten, anything you want to add, anything like that. And then we'll certainly get to the questions that are coming up in the chat.
Whew. That was a lot.
It was a lot.
And so good. And this is where the invitation comes in. We'll send the recording to everyone, and we hope that you can, then send it and share it widely among your networks. If anyone needs a dose of inspiration, if anyone needs, an understanding of how can I help, this is so, it's been a year, right? And I just wanted to, while we're still on this Atlanta GLEANING Initiative, really wanted to just highlight back through some of the things that Katie said, and the amount of learning. I mean, I wish we could just spend so much more time in the learning that we had over the year, where we think about over 23,000 pounds of food recovered, and that matters to the people who are able to access that food. And the learning that we are taking from that is really going to reverberate further. And within that learning, this is where we slow things down a little bit, where we were in deep community with the people who live and work in and around the Atlanta area, who are telling us, where does the food need to go? And what were the needs that they had to ensure that that food got to where it needed to go. I just really wanted to highlight that, because as we begin to replicate the initiative that we did here, it's not going to look the same in other places because of the ways the communities are shaped, who's working there, the capacity of those communities. It's all going to be slightly different. But we understand working in community and hearing from those in the community what they need. This is often the work of unsung heroes. You know, we don't always have the press releases there. We don't always have the media and cameras and photo ops. It's really the work of people who care. And I think as we are moving to our pop-up markets, we're so excited about that. As we're moving to our pop-up markets, you know, FRN isn't necessarily always going to be in Atlanta doing this exact thing because we are working to make the community change, adding that capacity so that they know what they want, they know how to do it, and can FRN be there to support that infrastructure change that needed to happen so that they can keep on expanding that access. And now can we go somewhere else? And can we go somewhere else? I really can't emphasize enough the slow moving work that it takes to do this, you know, for a variety of reasons. And it can be slow moving work because, as these communities know too well, sometimes, you know, this is what we call these under-resourced communities. As Katie mentioned again, these aren't the communities that are necessarily already recirculating surplus food. We have to create pathways that maybe didn't exist before, or the pathways weren't so well worn. So I just wanted to mention that as we move forward. And maybe I should, I'm looking at Cassie, you might not be able to tell that, Cassie, but if there's any questions or anything that we should respond to.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, there was a couple of questions specifically on the Atlanta, so thanks for prompting that, Regina. Katie, I'll turn this question to you. Someone, Jen in the chat, hi Jen, was asking what the timing for the 6-week pop-up in Atlanta was, and if you could share a little more about that. And another person similarly asked if there's going to be further events in Atlanta for the gleaning work.
So yes and yes, that'd be great. So the first elementary school farmers market is going to start on October 13th. And our idea was initially to host one a week for 6 weeks, which we can still absolutely do. After we do the first one, or when we're doing the first one in October 13th, we really want to talk to the community members to understand, would one a week actually be sufficient? Or should we do 2 a week for 3 weeks to figure out, again, how do we actually move the most produce in this community in a way that serves that community? But it will all kick off on October 13th. And we certainly hope to continue this work in Atlanta. We are actively fundraising to try and do something in the spring of next year to continue the work in Atlanta. So we certainly hope so. Right now, we've only secured funding for the farmers market through this first half of the year, but I certainly hope it will.
And I would love to translate what Katie just said so beautifully into a specific invitation. As my job as executive director, we really are trying to fundraise to support feeding more people faster in Atlanta. And I know that there are some folks on this roundtable talk that have helped with that. That has really helped to make sure that we have funding to get this pilot started, to get it up and running. We've learned so much, and it would mean so much to us if we could continue this. We know that there is more that FRN can do specifically. And so the invitation, you know, if folks think about ways that they might be able to support FRN, what connections you might have in Atlanta, or others who might be interested in this work, who have access to financial resources, we are very open.
Thanks, Regina. I'll do one last question about the Atlanta and then move us along. Tom in the chat asked, will the pop-up markets in Atlanta be donation only or opportunities for people to purchase the produce?
Yep, that's a great question. It's donation only through working with the Atlanta public education system. We're specifically doing pop-ups at schools where we know purchasing fresh produce is a challenge within that community. So it will be donation only.
Great, thank you. And I also know that we're looking to engage local FRN chapters to recover any surplus produce that is not already donated during that time as well.
Correct.
Great. All right, then I will keep us moving. I'll turn it over to you, Regina, thinking about all this data that Katie shared. What are kind of some key learnings and how it'll help to inform this coming year?
Thank you so much, Cassie. And, some of what I'm about to say, is a highlight of what you've all heard throughout. But just to put a finer point on it, so much abundance of learning, this past program year, that is going to help us into this current program year. We knew it all along. I mean, we built it into our strategic framework, FRN 10X, that when we work in partnership with values-aligned organizations, groups, individuals, we accelerate our impact. And what I mean by our impact is our ability to feed more people faster, our ability to, join into communities where there isn't an FRN chapter or there isn't a food recovery verified, recovery happening. When we work together in partnership, we are able to do more. And we will continue to seek out those value-aligned partnerships into this program year. And so we're really excited about some of the things that we are exploring for this year, and that is already in the works as well. Gosh, we know that there are so many of you amazing student leaders on this call right now, and please know, try not to get teary-eyed. We understand you have a lot of stress on your shoulders. Being a college student, just in and of itself, is stressful. And we know that things are never going to be the same. We're still in COVID. We are still in monkeypox now. We know that, is there a recession? Is there not? There's inflation? We are all feeling that. And you're trying to study. You're trying to meet new friends. You're trying to stay on campus. And so I just wanted to honor and recognize that. We've heard from a lot of you, and you say it so gracefully. You really do. But we know that there's a lot of stress. So thank you for all that you do for FRN. We see you. Also, investment matters. What do I mean by that? Well, at FRN, a huge thank you to Katie, our amazing COO who joined the team right around the time of the pandemic, right around the time of this racial injustice uprising that we all are feeling. There's so many things happening. Katie's like, yes, I'll join the FRN team. Katie understood the goal of FRN is when we can invest in our team, what does that look like? And Katie supported FRN growing our budget so that we can pay everyone on the team a living wage. We can support our team through expanded benefits. FRN started as a volunteer group, and I've talked about our journey all throughout the years of having AmeriCorps Vista and having a fellowship that didn't pay people a living wage. It just didn't. And Katie came in and was immediately like, we need to pressure test this. If we cannot pay our team a living wage, this model doesn't work. It just doesn't work. And we were able to do that. And we see that you saw the goals that we hit. When we invest in our team, when we care about our team, FRN has a very strong culture of care. We have this concept called the well of reciprocity. We care about each other. We like each other, and we foster that intentionally. We do things to foster that care. You saw the goals, and then you saw the next slide where we surpassed all of those goals. And so that's what investment looks like. Yes, sometimes it is material, and other times it comes in other forms too. In the community, Katie talked about, and we'll talk about again further, when we invest in our communities, when we pay our farmers a living wage and fair prices to do the work, that money goes into the pockets and the bank accounts, whatever you want to call it, back to the farmers, back to their staff, back into their local communities. When we work in community, when we help support the kind of infrastructure that the community would like to see and has asked for, we can see impact in our student leaders. Again, we really need to hear from you, all of you. We know that sometimes you don't need a grant from us. You need to have us listen in on what you're what you're experiencing and troubleshoot with you. When we want to support you in the ways that you need. And so we hope that by, continuing to grow the FRN network, we show through walking the walk that we want to invest in our student leaders, even once they graduate. Kimmy, hello, being on the team, we've been able to, and Julia listening in, hiring directly from our incredible network and, other opportunities for our students all across the country. And we've heard from people directly, our stakeholders, that we can do a better job of making the connection between economic security and food insecurity. So we've been around for over a decade now. We're going to celebrate our birthday in September, but while we're still 10 years old, we're going to celebrate our 10th year and recovering 10 million pounds of food. So that's another invitation. We'll have some really fun stuff, the first week of September after Labor Day. But some people know FRN as an organization that does food recovery, feeding people today. And so what does it mean when FRN talks about increasing the federal minimum wage so that we can support people? What does it mean when we think about college debt that is supporting people to be food insecure and housing insecure? So we need to do a better job of making that connection, that when people are economically secure, when they have enough financial resources to feed themselves and their families, food insecurity dissipates. Housing insecurity dissipates. Medical, healthcare, debt dissipates. So we will do that this year, make more of a connection between our work to end hunger forever by supporting the economic security of the 38 million people right now. You know many of them. You might be a person yourself facing food insecurity. We will work to end hunger for those 38 million people by supporting their economic security. So if you have feedback on that, please know that we are all ears. Thank you so much. Okay, so moving forward, how are we adjusting based on what we learned? Again, this roundtable talk, we'll have another one, it's biannual, we'll have another talk in February. We are taking into consideration all that we've heard from all of you as we apply it to Atlanta. To Irvine, as we think about, what does growth look like into new communities. So we are constantly working on that feedback loop. And here we are, our goals for this year. So we're working to support the recovery of 2 million pounds of food, abundance. There is over 26 million tons of food on the farm fields, industrial settings. And as our students are working to do food recovery on their chapters, we're hoping to see an increase in those incredible chapters doing recovery for themselves and for their communities. So 2 million pounds of food. As Katie mentioned, we are working to expand the organizational impact metrics. What does it look like when FRN is in community, and are we able to put those resources back into the community? How can we talk about that? How can we tell that story? Volunteer hours, another incredible metric around the health of a community. So we're working this year to put more metrics in place to tell that story. We want to keep growing. We want higher education to be the first sector where food recovery is the norm and not the exception. And so that means this year we're hoping to recruit 30 new chapters. And half of those chapters, we do want those to be in those 10 target states that we have identified that have the highest opportunity to recover food because they have the highest abundance of surplus food and the highest number of people who are experiencing food insecurity. And we're going to do more learning too on where are those communities experiencing hunger and how can we continue to literally drive that food to where it needs to go. And deeper connections. I don't really always like to use the word dynamic. It's like, what does that mean? It's one of those filler words. But truly, we talk about this at FRN a lot. Relationships are actually dynamic. They grow, they change. all the time. And so we can truly deepen our relationships, with the folks that are in community with us, new people coming in who want to help support our work. And so we're going to do that in a variety of different ways. Our town halls with our incredible student leaders. We're going to expand our work, authentically and in community with community colleges. And Katie and I and the full team, we can talk a lot about what that looks like, our work in community colleges. This is new for us. The needs of community college students, the staff, those communities might look different than the needs of four-year institutions. Where four-year institutions are located is different than where community colleges are located, but we know that community colleges are a hub for their overall communities, and so we want to see how can we help those communities. And I'm actually going to turn to Katie specifically to see if I'm sure there's more that you want to highlight and expand on that piece.
I also just want to add, I see in the chat that there's a lot of people who are talking about fresh produce recoveries at farmers markets and doing this kind of hub stop work in your community. One of the ways that we are trying to convene students this year is actually to learn more specifically about that in terms of how could we actually get more gleaning, farmers markets, fresh produce recoveries. So if that is something that you're interested, please do put it on the chat, and we have your contact information so we can get you on the back end, but we would love to invite you to be part of that group. Again, for all of the students on that call, we will be having these student town halls where we're going to be bringing, kind of program design questions to you to say, what would it look like if you were to help, mobilize a community college in your campus or in your neighborhood? Could that be something that you do? What would it look like to have consistent recoveries? What resourcing do you need to recover more food? So I do just want to put a little bit more context on that and a little plug for please come and join our task force if you're interested. So what does this actually mean, and what does it actually look like in practice with these impact goals? So I just wanted to highlight a couple big things that you're going to start to see from us really in the first half of this year. First, we asked everyone if they had questions to please email us beforehand. So again, this is a feedback loop so we can address your questions on this call. One of the questions that we always get is, do we work in K through 12 to help high schools or elementary schools recover themselves? So for a variety of reasons, we have always worked in college campuses, but we understand that there is a need. So the first thing that we're going to do is actually create a high school food recovery guide that'll be downloadable on our website. And we're going to be monitoring the downloads to actually see how that goes. And if there's some sort of like critical impasse where maybe we do want to consider branching down to K-12, but we first just want to fix this need that we constantly get asked about, well, what if my individual local school wants to recover? But please know that resource will be there probably by the end of this month. And we'll be monitoring the downloads to see if this is something we should more strongly consider. I also want to say for all of the faculty and staff advisors on this call, we know that we haven't done a great job supporting you all over these last 2 years. We have absolutely prioritized the students, and we know that you are a key stakeholder that we should have done more for. So one of the reasons that we're going to try to get back in the field, which I'll talk about in a second, is really to also help bring community to the nationwide cohort of faculty and staff that support our students so wholeheartedly and so often are really that consistent thread in chapters as students move on and graduate. So over the next month, you'll actually please be on the lookout for an email from us to say, hey, here's what you can expect for us this year. Hey, here's a call you can join if you have particular questions. We would love to send you a care package with an FRN t-shirt and mug, and just to say thank you for all that you've done. So we're really going to try and focus on bringing you all together this year. And that's just part of FRN getting back into the field. Again, so much of this grassroots work was limited because of COVID and restrictions of convening and all of that sort of thing. So as it is safe to do so, we are really going to try to get back in the field to host convenings of chapters where we have a concentration of chapters. Philadelphia is one of those areas. We intend to do campus tabling efforts. So if you are interested in FRN helping you with volunteer recruitment, or perhaps a neighborhood school who wants a chapter, we would like to be in those communities with you. Also, we will be engaging our students at large scale event food recoveries throughout the year. So for instance, last year we recovered at basically a pre-game Super Bowl party, and we brought students from the local chapter to help us recover at the Super Bowl, and that was so well received. So we really want to try and replicate that again. So for instance, this fall we'll be recovering from the Indianapolis Colts home games, and we're going to be hopefully mobilizing that chapter and the alumni in that area to come to the Colts games and help us recover. So that's just a few examples of how we're going to really actualize this learning. And then we look forward to reporting back to you in February on how it's going.
Thank you, Katie. And you wonderfully answered a couple of questions in the chat just as you were talking as well. I know some folks are asking about expanding beyond college campuses, and that really goes with what Katie's talking about, looking across the food supply chain, looking at larger events, working with food businesses through our Food Recovery Verified program as well. So now I'm just going to prompt a couple of questions that we've gotten as we start to close out our time here today. One of the questions that we came in was very specifically around looking to reduce the carbon footprint of a chapter on campus. And this person was talking about specifically using reusable containers, which is really great. So you can definitely get in touch with us and we can support you in funding that. And I'd just be curious, I wanted to prompt it to any other students on the call or faculty advisors or anything like that about how you might be looking to reduce the carbon footprint on your campus. What tools are you using? What different programs are you running? We'd love to hear from the folks on this call. And Katie and Regina, I wanted to let you both chime in if you have anything else to add there.
I'll just add that some of our chapters have used the grants. That this goes back to, if you fill out the OCA and you're an official chapter, you can get a grant from FRN National. And some of our chapters have used that money to purchase either reusable pans or biodegradable pans that help, and supplies that help with recovery. So that's just like one tangible example of how we can help you reduce that footprint.
I will also add to that from a slightly different angle, which is, I know this statistic might sound very familiar to many of you, but food waste is the largest thing that we have in our landfills here in the US. It is the third largest emitter of greenhouse gases, US, China, number 1 and number 2. So if you are looking to figure out ways to be, carbon neutral or sustainable, whatever the terms are, whatever your goals are, starting a recovery program is an immediate thing that you can do. And when you walk with FRN, or if you are, in community with FRN, I don't want to use ableist terms here, beginning that recovery program is an immediate step. And we can work with you to figure out the logistics to get even more into the sustainability, but the runway that we have of getting a recovery program up and going, your ability to immediately help the environment is astronomical. And then everything else from there, can become a nuance. But let's, get that recovery program going in place. Let's not, let the details of it, prevent us. We don't want perfection to be, the thing that stops us. It's a little messy, and that's what makes it fun.
Yes, thank you. All right, I will keep us moving now that we just have a minute left. I wanted to share some different next steps, and thank you all for just joining and going in the chat. It was fun to see folks connecting with one another and kind of all across. And so just thank you all for your contributions today. Some next steps that you all can participate in, kind of bringing this big picture down to realistic happenings, are joining our student calls and town halls like we've been talking about today. If you aren't already a donor of Food Recovery Network, that's a great way to support our movement. Becoming a recurring donor really supports the sustainability of our program, and being able to support our students all across the US and expanding our program to more chapters. Looking at our blog, I know we talked a lot about connecting food insecurity and economic insecurity today, and Regina's written some really great blog posts on that and really educating our network about that. So if you're interested in learning more about that and other resources for our students, check out our blog. And finally, following along on our social media. I know we shared a lot today, and you can really follow along on our social media there to be able to stay up to date and knowing what's going on with FRN. So with that, I'll just turn it over to you, Regina, just for any final thoughts and kind of wrapping up here.
Thank you all so much for your time. Again, to the FRN team, you're amazing. I'm so honored to work with all of you. 10 million pounds recovered, through the efforts of everyone on this call. It's really incredible. We look forward to being in engagement with all of you in many different ways. Just really quickly, again, I have to do my job, the plug. If you are in a financial situation where it makes sense for you, right? We're not asking if it doesn't make sense, with love. There's many other ways to be engaged. But think about becoming that recurring donor, because it really does support FRN and how we can make our decisions, knowing that every month we can rely on those recurring donations. So just wanted to say that with love. Thank you to everyone. Thank you for your time. And I hope the rest of your day is incredible.
Yay. Awesome. Thank you all. Appreciate your time, and we will be in touch. Thanks everyone for participating.
Thank you all so much. Bye, everyone.
Bye all.